So when you think about it at that level, when you pull the lens way back into this more national history, kind of global, world history kind of point of view, and look in our moment in history here, the politics, a lot of the kind of busy kind of, oh my God, jobs report came out today, and oh my God, the polls are, this way, 2 points up in Florida. All that stuff just kind of falls away. And although there is a way to kind of analyze the election and think about those kind of things, and it excites me, it's something I'm interested in too, what's really much more interesting is the essence of really when all that stuff falls away, what's really going on in this election. And I think my kind of way, I got a couple ways to think about that. Now, the way most people, think, if we think of the big picture in historic kind of terms, what happened with the Obama election? We say, well, gosh, we're in this kind of incredible downturn that was the biggest kind of drop in the economy since, the Great Depression. And since that point, Obama's kind of making the case that he's been trying to pull this economy up out of this incredible crater that was in. And there's a good case to be made, and that's actually, I think, bears kind of thinking about. People are saying, well, why aren't we back booming? Well, because we came out of this crater, and my God, there's 4 million jobs. There's other ways to kind of look. If you look at his first, term, comparing him historically, there's been 44, 45 presidents now. Most presidents are lousy. Most 4-year cycles are like, nobody gets much accomplished. And so I would say in historic terms, that's a pretty good first term. And most really great presidents take about 8 years, and it's their second 4 years that really kick in. So I think there's an argument to be made with a bigger picture lens on what's going on there. But that's not the way I'm going to even talk about this now either. I think what's really going on here is it really is a choice that we haven't seen in a generation. Obama's making that case. Pundits have been starting to make it, and I think there's something to it. But I have it with a twist. And the twist is this, is that when Obama talks about this once-a-generation call, he's thinking the last time the country made essentially a generational call was essentially the election of Ronald Reagan, where you essentially came off about a 30 or 40-year run of liberal democratic kind of running in the country, and you made a fundamental change into a kind of conservative kind of view of how you'd run that economy. Much more smaller government idea, free market thing, cut regulations, cut taxes, try that. And that was a big shift, and it really did define the politics of this country for the last 30 years or so. He's kind of teeing it up thinking that, and he's often talked about Reagan as a kind of a historic character. There is something to that, but I'm going to think even bigger here in a minute here. There is essentially a rhythm in American politics from that big picture historical point of view that essentially is there's this essentially two ways to think of the two sides of American politics. Don't think about it in party terms per se. Think of it, there's a conservative kind of pull in politics and there's a progressive pull. Not progressive in the way you think of San Francisco progressives right now. But there's a generic way to think about what this is. Just think of the word progressive. It's usually progress. Conservative is more conserve. It's kind of more forward thinking. Let's innovate. And there's a kind of let's look back to what worked in the past. There's a kind of, again, an innovative kind of spirit a lot of times. Let's try new stuff. There tends to be, let's preserve the best stuff, go back to the Constitution, that kind of stuff. And ultimately, I would say these periods of reinvention, which we're going to talk about, are generated usually in progressive kind of eras, and ultimately you have reactions off that are usually fighting, kicking, and screaming from the conservative side. So what's happened in American history is this thing has happened over and over and over again. It tends to happen that the conservative side of things tends to actually be those that have a lot, and often it's people with a lot of money, tend to want to hang on to what's going on, and those that don't have much and want to bet on the future move towards the progressive side. So you constantly get this situation of this 1% and 9%. This is the kind of language of we saw last year in the Occupy Wall Street thing, but there's something to it, and this has happened over again in history. Now, if you take that, what's going on in terms of how parties have done this, it isn't always Democrats, it isn't always the Republicans on one side and the Democrats on the other. The Republicans have the biggest progressive Republicans or Americans in history have been actually Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, progressive presidencies, radically changed the country. And in fact, the bad guys, the conservatives at that time, were the Democrats, hanging on to slavery, for God's sakes. It was, but you could say in terms of current politics in the last generation, there was essentially a different kind of progressives were on the Democratic Party, and we've actually seen the conservatives kind of capture more the sense of the conservative side. So when you see this election, this is essentially we are getting this, we're seeing this thing now. This is kind of an obvious thing, but what I'm trying to say is don't just think of it think of it as how the real fundamentals of what's going on. This is the juncture. This is the big choice. This is the thing that basically Obama's been trying to talk about. Yeah, there's specifics to the policies, but essentially it's a way forward. It's essentially what they're trying to figure out is which direction are we going to go, which is the country. Is the country at one of these cusps? Now, you could say the conservatives have essentially over those 30 years kind of come up with a set of ideas, and they are doubling down on those kind of ideas. And we saw that basically with, here we are. Yeah, Romney. Romney's essentially doubled down with this essentially way that we've been doing it for 30 years. It started with Reagan, kept going with Bush, and in fact, he's still there too. And he's also kind of personifies that 1%, which is kind of difficult for him right now. With his money in the Cayman Islands, all that kind of stuff. And what we've kind of seen is, Obama's trying to push the other direction. Now, he's trying to say, let's use useful government. Let's try to innovate forward a little bit. Let's bring everybody around. So that's kind of the choice we're seeing. Now, I would say, and there's all kinds of ways to analyze it in conventional ways, I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win substantially, much more than people think. And I think there's going to be a lot of down-ballot kind of shift, too. And I think you're going to basically see a sense coming out of this election of a choice beginning to be made. It won't be the final choice. There'll be other runs at this. But I think we're actually seeing this kind of, in a historical point of view, there's something moving away from this conservative thing of the last 30 years. That's one way to think about what's going on historically.